Housel has reshaped the way millions, look at money, investing, and financial behavior through his best-selling book, The Psychology of Money. And guess what? He's right here with us at the Moneycontrol Global Wealth Summit. Morgan, welcome to India. Lovely having you here. First of all, what is that one investing lesson that you would like every, individual to remember?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I think if there's one idea to tie this all together that is true for everybody, no matter where you live, is the idea that there is not one right answer for everybody in money. I think the biggest financial mistakes that people make is following a financial plan that is right for somebody else but not for you. It's like you're chasing somebody else's dream. And so how I save my money, how I spend my money, how I invest my money might be different from how you do it. Not because we disagree with each other, just because we're different people, different generations sometimes, different countries, different risk tolerances. There are so many things that I do with my money that very smart, educated financial advisors would say, that's not right, you're doing this wrong. And I would say, look, I know by the textbook it's not right, but it works for me. So what you have to do for everybody is just like take a good long look in the mirror and try to figure out who you are. For you and your family, like what's your risk tolerance, what's your goals? And everyone's goals are different. And so too many people try to think of it like it is math, where it's just like, there's a formula, show me the right answer. And it's just not like that. It's a very individualistic pursuit. You just have to figure out who you are and what you want for you and your family.
So Morgan, you get a chance to interact with some of the best financial professionals, investors globally. So what are some of the surprising or very interesting insights that you have gathered from these conversations through these years?
I think the common denominator of very successful investors, one is that they tend to be very good at explaining what they do, very good at communicating what they do. And usually the reason they're good at communicating it is because what they do is very simple. Even if they are very sophisticated investors, they're very intelligent, they know what they're doing, they can explain to a 5-year-old what they're doing and why they do it. And it tends to be that the investors who are very complicated can't really explain it. The reason they can't really explain it very well is in a lot of cases they themselves don't really understand what they're doing as well. There's almost this weird correlation in investing where the more complicated it sounds, the higher the odds that the person explaining it doesn't really understand it themselves. And if you look at some of the most successful investors over time, they can explain it so simple. And I think that's very common. It tends to be that what matters in investing is not necessarily the returns that you can earn in any given year. It's how long you can keep it going for. Can you just be a good investor for a very long period of time? You don't need to be great. Can you just be good for a very long time? And the highest odds of being just merely good or just being merely average are people who are doing it very simple. They understand what they're doing and they can keep it going for a long period of time.
Right. Mohan, what has been the biggest mistake people make with money without even realizing it?
I think, there are 8 billion people on this planet. Probably 5 or 6 billion of them live pretty well. They eat well, they have a nice roof over their heads, they have air conditioning and heating, they're in decent health. And for that mass majority of the planet, most of their problems in life come from expectations. They're actually living a pretty good life, but they don't feel like it because they're comparing themselves to other people who at least appear to be living a better life than them. And so I think that's one of the biggest problems with money as well. For people who are probably by any reasonable definition are living a good life, earning a good income, they can save some money, but they feel like they're falling behind because they're looking at other people and saying, well, relative to that person, their house is bigger, their car is faster, their clothes are nicer than mine, so I need to go catch up to them. And it's a constant chain. And that's been true forever, that we look at other people and have a sense of jealousy and envy and try to chase them from that. It is way more potent today just because of social media, because your ability to look at other people who appear to be happier than you and living a better life is so powerful. And so no matter how much money you're making, this is true for most of the world, it is easier than ever today to become rich, to do well financially. And at the same time, it is easier than ever to feel like you are falling behind because the propensity to compare yourself to others is so powerful these days.
Morgan touched upon the subject of social media, and in today's era, that's a very important thing. And how do you see this whole, growing or mushrooming of this financial advisors, the finfluencers as we call it here, this growing influence of social media and finfluencers? How has that influenced people's investment decisions? And do you think that there is inherent risk involved in these kind of advices?
I think on net it's a good thing because it used to be not that long ago, 10 or 15 years ago, that if you wanted good financial advice, it was only available to the wealthy. And you could read the Wall Street Journal or watch CNBC, whatever it might be. But by and large, if you wanted financial advice, you had to be a wealthy person and go to a financial advisor. And the fact that you can get a lot of good information today for free online is great. That's good for everybody. The downside of that is now that there's virtually no filter. And a lot of the information that you're going to find on social media financially is probably bad advice for you. It's either bad advice for everybody or it might be good advice for some people, but not for you. And what's definitely true in social media, in all forms of media, but particularly social media, is that what people want good advice, but what they are attracted to is advice that sounds good. And a lot of social media influencers will tell you what you want to hear, even if it's not very good advice. So people who are very pessimistic, they're bombastic, they're promising the world, promising high returns, they're going to get the most attention, even if it's not necessarily good advice for you. So a lot of times in finance, the advice that you need to hear is not what you want to hear. And that's a problem in social media.
Is there any financial principle that you personally struggle to follow?
I don't know if I would say struggle to follow. I would say there are things I do with my money that would not be right for other people. But I think what I do works well for me and for my wife and for my family. We sleep well at night. And it's, what I want more than anything is independence. I just want, if I can use my money to live an independent life where I can work when I want, do the kind of work that I want, I can retire whenever I want, live wherever I want to, sleep in when I want to, travel when I want to, and do it on my own terms. That's all I want out of money. And so that's always kind of been my North Star that I'm trying to chase. And so even if there are areas of my life where might look like I am deficient, and I could do better here, and but it all makes context in the sense of I just want independence. That's all I want out of money.
So one of the key topics that you've always touched upon or discussed was the unpredictability of financial markets. So given the current ongoing volatility and unpredictability and uncertainty of financial markets globally, what are the 2-3 key things that you think that investors should look at on what are the, in terms of investing strategies that investors should look at given this unpredictability and uncertainty?
So it's always the case that you're going to look at the volatility and the uncertainty and assume at least that it's something new, that we used to live in a certain world, but now there's uncertainty, and that's never the case. There's no more uncertainty today than there was 10 years ago or 50 years ago, and I think actually in a lot of contexts there's less. There's more predictability today than there may have been in the past. It doesn't seem that way because if we're talking about the past, we know how the story ends. So if we're trying to think about the mindset of somebody 10 years ago, it might seem like, oh, there was less uncertainty then than there. No, there wasn't. It's just that we know what happened over the last 10 years. But somebody 10 years ago didn't. The world was very uncertain to them 10 years ago. And so I think what we're dealing with today is nothing new. If there is any strategy to deal with it, it's that your biggest asset as an investor is your ability to endure and put up with uncertainty. That's what you get paid for. And the people who can do that, rather than thinking that you can avoid risk, which is very difficult to do, your ability to endure it and just put up with it and just be a punching bag for risk is really the best asset for most investors.
Okay, another thing is the times are really changing, right? It's the age of artificial intelligence, automation. How do you think our approach to money and investing should evolve along with changing times?
I don't know if it should. What worked in investing 100 years ago, by and large, still works today. Very, very different world in terms of technology and innovation and whatnot. But what worked back then in terms of diversification, compounding, long-term, it's the same 100 years ago as it is today. And I think it will be 100 years from now. So it's always a different industry, different change and innovation and whatnot. But the core principles of what works doesn't. It's possible that 50 years from now, I invest differently than I do today. But I would bet not. It's possible that I change my mind and do something differently, but I would bet that 50 years from now, if I'm still around, hopefully, that I will be investing largely the same. Now, if I'm an index fund, that the companies in that index will be completely different. All new industries, companies that exist today will not exist then. It'll be completely different in that sense. But in terms of diversified, long-term, compounding, low cost, that won't necessarily change. So, and I think that's the most important part. It's not necessarily what industry it is. It's just like, do you have the behavior right? And that's what's timeless.
Now, Morgan, in your book, you have discussed the concept of getting rich versus staying rich. So how do you suggest people approach wealth preservation once they have achieved financial success in life?
It's true. I think there's that Buffett quote, you should only get rich once. You only need to get rich once. And it's true that for a lot of people, once they reach some level of financial success, they keep taking more risk until it blows. It's like they're going to keep taking risk until they have a blow up moment. And I think that's by and large a problem. That it actually makes sense for a lot of people that the wealthier they become, the less risk that they take. but it's rare. It's rare that is the case. I think you have someone like Elon Musk, who I've always said, like, he will either be a trillionaire or bankrupt. It's one of the two. I have no idea which one of those it's going to be, but a lot of people like that do not have the kind of mentality where they say, that's enough. I don't need to take any more risk. I can just kind of slow down and pursue something else that I enjoy in my life. They don't have that mentality at all. I'm grateful that people like Elon Musk and all those people exist. They just take so much enormous risks that creates new technologies and whatnot we can benefit from. But the idea of it's never enough is the core problem with that, of getting rich and staying rich. They have the ability to get rich, but not the ability to stay rich. Because the reason they got rich is from taking a risk, but they have no ability to turn that off and move to another phase of life.
Mohan, a lot is happening on the trade front globally. Trade wars intensifying. So, tell us, is the era of easy money behind us?
I don't know if it ever was easy. I mean, it was easy in terms of low interest rates and whatnot, but for most people in the stock market globally over the last 10 years, yes, we know in hindsight that in the US the stock market's done well over the last 10 years, but again, we didn't know that 10 years ago. I've been investing for roughly 20 years. At every point in those 20 years, people said the market's overvalued, the easy money has been made, the economy is heading for a recession, inflation's right. Every single moment that has been said. There's never been a case when that was not said. And so it feels different now, but I think it's largely the case. Yes, there are a lot of trade wars that are relevant today that maybe weren't here a couple years ago, but I think by and large on net, there's always something to look at with a sense of worry and dread. That's nothing new.
So Morgan, as an author and a financial expert, how has your understanding of money evolved over the years, especially after writing your book, The Psychology of Money?
I think one of the criticisms of Psychology of Money, which I thought was fair, was what people who said it was just written through the lens of an American. And my response is yes, of course, that's because that's who I am. But I think that opened my eyes to this idea that there is not one right answer. That's probably been my biggest change in how I think, is the idea, like I don't judge people as much financially as I used to. And I think, of course, a lot of people make poor financial decisions that they will end up regretting. But I think to a further extent, I look at other people who do things differently than me with a sense of like, hey, that might work for you. That's not how I would do it, but if it's working for you, like, okay, we'll go for it. And there's not one right answer. And I think that opened I opened my eyes to that when I heard feedback from other countries and other cultures. And people who would say, look, what you wrote in the book, that might be true in America, but it's not true in China or Russia or Brazil or India, wherever it might be. And there are things that are true here that would not be true for me. Different cultures, different aspirations, different for everybody. So I become less judgmental over time.
Before I wrap, what's the one thing that you would like people to know about Morgan Housel that they don't already know?
Not much. I spend most of my time just trying to figure out how people think. And maybe this comes off in the writing, but there's sometimes I think I'm actually not that interested in money and investing. I mean, that might sound weird, but what I'm interested in is in how people think. And all of that can fall under a money umbrella, but it also falls how people think about life in general and relationships and politics, whatever it might be. It all falls under this umbrella of how do people think about risk and uncertainty and living a good life. And yes, I've always had a financial component to that, but I think it's much broader. So maybe if that's something that might not always come across, is that yes, I'm interested in money, but I'm interested in so much more than that. I think it's at the core, it's just like, how do you live a good life? Money is a component to that, but I think it's only one small component of it.
Well said, Morgan. Thanks a lot. Lovely catching up and great to have you here. Thanks a lot for interacting.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Morgan.